Thank you so much for joining us online here at Fam Church for our message series, Best Question Ever. Now, if you would like to know more about us here at Fam Church, you can go out to myfamchurch.com, look over everything, get to know us, and if you have any prayer requests, please go to the contact section of our website. Send us your prayer request and we will pray for you. Now, our lead pastor, Brian Lane.
My name is Brian. I'm the lead pastor here at Fam Church. We're excited that all of you are here with us today. And our mission, our heart, is to help lead people of all backgrounds to become fully devoted followers of Jesus. Our heart, our goal, and our passion is to reach the city of Mulberry, to see this city reached for the name of Jesus so that no one in this community would have to perish without hearing that name. And if you're a first-time guest with us this morning, we're excited that you're with us. If you're in church for the first time or the first time in a long time, I want to let you know that we don't want anything from you this morning. We have something for you. And I really believe that this morning's message, even if you are not a follower of Jesus, if you were to take this and apply it to your life, this is going to give you the tools that you need to help live the best life that you can possibly live. And so if you were here last week, we're in this series called The Best Question Ever. And basically, it's a book by Andy Stanley called Ask It, and I've taken it and turned it into 3 messages. This word, if you take this and apply it to your life, is going to have just positive effects. And last week, we started off this message with the first one, with what questions do we ask? What questions do we ask in life? And if you missed last week and you want to hear last week's message, you can go out to myfamchurch.com, click on the media tab, and that'll take you to our messages. If you click on the icon, the picture of the best question ever, that'll open up that video. You can watch it there. And so last week, the best part of it, I think, was the opening story. Because I got so much feedback last week on the opening story. It's the most feedback I'd ever gotten on an opening story in one of my messages. You guys seem to all enjoy the worm story, Carol. I mean, you guys just seem to really enjoy that. I don't have one of those for you today, though. I'm sorry. So, I know you're disappointed, Lewis. I know how it goes. But let's do a quick review of last week, okay? What we looked at last week was how we make decisions. And how we saw most of us make decisions is this. We'll look at a situation and we will ask one of 2 questions of that situation. And it could be for any decision. It could be big moral decisions like, should I have an affair? Or it could be less important decisions like, well, it's still an important decision, but should I marry this person? Or should I buy this house? And we'll look at those things, we'll look at those questions, and we'll ask ourselves 2 questions to decide whether or not we should do it. Okay, and the first question we'll ask ourselves is this. Is my heart telling me to do this? Okay, that's usually the first question that we will ask is, what is my heart telling me to do? And what we saw last week was that was a really bad question to ask ourselves. Because the Bible tells us in the book of Jeremiah, it tells us that the heart is deceitfully wicked. And so the deal is that if we were to take time and if we were to really look inside of our heart and see where our heart is at and the decisions that we make from our heart, we would see that in fact a lot of the things that we want to do are not the best plan. And I gave you some examples of things that my heart has communicated to me to do, and we saw that if I would have actually lived those out, there would have been dire consequences for me living out those actions. And so we decided, okay, that is not a good question to ask, because if all of us were to look deep in our heart, we would all see the same things in our heart that I saw in mine. And so we said, okay, let's take that question out. It'll take us down the wrong path. Let's not ask that question, what is my heart telling me to do? Well, the second question we looked at was this. Was the question, well, then what do we ask ourselves? Is there anything wrong with what we're about to do? That's the second question we'll ask. And usually that's a question that Christians that go to as their default question when they're trying to make a decision. You know, is there anything wrong with it? So we'll look at it, we'll say, well, is it illegal? Is it immoral? Is it unethical? And if the answer to those questions are no, we then conclude, we say, okay, then it must be okay for me to do this thing, and so we will go and do whatever it is. But what we found is when we're asking that question, what we're really doing is asking ourselves, how close to the edge of sin can we get without actually being pushed over and making a really bad decision? And we saw that that's not the place where we want to be. We don't want to be standing at the edge of a cliff with one foot dangling off like this regret. Jesus, or decisions that will give us consequences for all of our life. And so we said, okay, well, that question's better than asking our heart, but that's not the best question to ask. We found that the best question to ask ourselves is, what is the wise thing to do? Why was that the best question to ask?
Because that question, what it does is it allows us to assess a situation and look at potential pitfalls, find those pitfalls, and set up a boundary further back from the edge so that we're not standing on the edge of something, so that we're not standing on the edge of disaster. It gives us a place to fight. It gives us a place to push back. And it even gives us a place to make mistakes and not have dire consequences from it. And so we decided, okay, that's the question that we ask. Because if we ask a series of, is there anything wrong with the questions, it leads right up to the edge. But this question, is it wise, puts us back here and gives us space and it gives us room. And it also gives us the ability to make mistakes without really screwing up our life. And so what we're going to do this week is we're going to look at this question a little deeper, as there are 3 levels to this question. And to introduce this, I want to talk about a couple of decisions that I've made in the past. And this is going back to my youth pastor days. And these decisions, this series of decisions was made at a youth event. And I've told you guys this story before. But it has to do with me and our youth ministry getting kicked out of a Walmart in Orlando. Okay? And so what had happened was I had this group of students, and we headed to something called Fine Arts. And what Fine Arts is just a competition that students compete in various art categories. There's like 72 different categories, and they compete. And we had signed up for a bunch of stuff, and we were competing all day long. It started at 9 o'clock in the morning, and our students were competing from 9 a.m. until 7 o'clock that night. It was just one competition after another, and it had been a long, grueling, and intense day of these competitions. And so that night, as we loaded up to the bus, we were headed back to the hotel. And on our way to the hotel, we drove past a Walmart. And a couple of the adults said to me, hey, we need to stop at Walmart. We need to pick up some stuff from for the hotel. And I said, okay. And so we pulled in. And pretty soon kids started going, hey, can you get me this? And can you get me that? And can you get me this other thing? It was originally all supposed to be a couple of adults that went in. But what ended up happening was all the kids wanted sodas and snacks and all this stuff. And so we just said, all right, forget it. Everybody just go into Walmart if you want something. And so we went into Walmart, and I knew that the kids were a little bit high-strung, but I just didn't realize how high-strung and tense they were from the day. We got into Walmart, and we headed into the snack aisle, and the next thing I know, people are coming up with bras on their heads, and they're coming up they're grabbing clothes from off the clothes racks, and they're dancing in the aisle and doing all this weird stuff. And then I said to myself, well, let's take this around the store, because this is kind of fun, right? And so we started to wander around the store with people dancing with bras on their heads, bras on their butts, and clothes all over the place. I mean, they were just grabbing clothes and throwing them on, okay? And so this Walmart, for some reason, had construction going on in it, and so they had cleared this large area. And so we were walking by, and we said, dance floor. And so the kids got out there and started to dance. Well, me, being a good youth pastor, I said to myself, you know what? This would make some good video. So I pulled out my cell phone, and I started to video the kids as they danced, as they did all of this stuff, as they entertained. Well, the manager of the Walmart did not appreciate this, and so she kicked us out of the store. But that wasn't the end of this story. So I'm thinking to myself, well, that was pretty fun. And so we got back to the hotel, and I had this idea of, I'm going to take all these videos that I shot of the kids dancing in Walmart and us getting in trouble, and I'm going to load them to my YouTube channel. Okay? Well, in all the paperwork I sent home, I told the parents, I said, be watching my YouTube channel, because I am going to load all of the kids' performances up on YouTube. So eventually, at some point over the weekend, if you weren't able to make it down to see this, you're going to be able to watch it on my YouTube channel. And so I've got all of the parents, I've got the pastor and his wife all monitoring my YouTube channel to watch their amazing kids compete. And what goes up on a Friday night? Us getting kicked out of Walmart. So I had the parents that were with me ticked off. I had all of the parents that were back at home, and the pastor and his wife wondering, what is this guy's problem? He's an idiot. And so you may be saying to yourself, well, that's an interesting story, but that doesn't sound relevant. The question, though, that I asked before I allowed the kids to do all of this stuff was the question, was there anything wrong with it, rather than what is the wise thing to do? See, there was nothing wrong with getting a little crazy in Walmart. We weren't stealing anything. We weren't breaking anything. We were just having a good time there in Walmart. And so I didn't ask that question. I asked the wrong question. I should have asked the question, what is the wise thing to do? But with that question, I should have gone deeper. The reason that I should have gone deeper with this question is, as I was sitting on this bus in the Walmart parking lot, is because of where each of us on that bus had come from in life. You see, each of us had had different experiences that have shaped and molded who we are. Plus, we have parents that come from different backgrounds and different perspectives, and they all have different perspective on things. And you got to understand, all of the kids on the bus, their parents were Caribbean islanders. Okay, if you want to know a parent that'll get ticked off when they see their kids screwing around, talk to a Caribbean parent, okay? They do not get happy when they see their kids screwing around. But I didn't think of this. All of this should have fed into my decision, but it didn't. And instead, I ended up with the situation that I ended up with. And so you're saying to yourself, okay, how does that look? How does that develop? I mean, how do I picture that in my life? Well, let me explain it to you this way. Some of us have grown up in environments where in our house, alcohol was not a big deal. You know, you'd sit down, the family would have a dinner, somebody would open a bottle of wine, people would have a glass of wine with their meal, maybe a can of beer with their pizza, and that would be the last time alcohol was seen until the next meal maybe. It didn't have a big impact. One drink didn't lead to 2 drinks, that didn't lead to 13 drinks. Okay, it was just kind of mellow, it was just kind of relaxed, it was just kind of chill, and if you grew up in that environment, your perspective was one thing. And then there are some of us that have had entirely different experiences with alcohol. You know, in our house or maybe in our life, our experience with alcohol has been there's not just a glass of wine with your dinner or beer with your pizza. Instead, it starts with 1, but that leads to 2, which leads to 12, which leads to you becoming a different person and the police showing up at the house. It leads to marriages and homes and chaos. It leads to kids trying to protect their parents from the other parent who has become a different person. And it's 2 completely different experiences. And so what happens when those 2 different experiences play out in people's lives is it looks like this. You've got the one person who watched a situation where they only had 1 glass of wine and somebody comes along and has a drink in front of them and it's not a big deal. But then you've got somebody else who's grown up in the other situation where things got out of control and then somebody wants to have a drink and they're not for that. They don't like alcohol. They don't want anyone drinking alcohol. And they've got a lot of harsh things to say about people who drink alcohol. You see, 2 different perspectives because of 2 different experiences in people's past lives. And so why is this important? Because on many occasions, the answer to the question, what is wise, will look different for different people. But you may say, well, I thought this book that we read from every week, it's got rules and regulations set down that we're to guide our lives by, and so they shouldn't look different. Well, here's the deal. There are many areas in the scriptures that are not clear, that God has left gray, and he has left them gray, and that's for you and him to figure out where the boundaries are in your life. Now, there are some areas that he has set solid boundaries, and we've got to maintain those. And so, like if you're sitting there praying one day, and you say, God, I need money to pay my light bill, and you hear a voice speak to you and say, go rob the 7-Eleven on South Florida Avenue, okay? We know in the Bible that it says you should not steal, okay? And so we know that that's not the voice of God. Okay, that's not God giving you some new wisdom that you can apply to your life, okay? And even God even tells people that have lived their lives as thieves but are now serving Jesus to quit stealing and get a job. That's our answer to that one. But there are other areas that need clarity as to what is wise. And so this morning we're going to be looking at one small section of the New Testament. We're going to be in the letter to the Ephesians. We're going to be in chapter 5. So if you know where Ephesians is at, you are welcome to turn there. If you don't know where that is at, we're going to be putting it on the screen behind me. If you're here this morning and you don't have a Bible and you would like a Bible, please stop by Fam Connections and we'll put a brand new Bible in your hands. We're going to be reading verses 15 through 17 in chapter 5. And like I said last week, this is going to be from the New Living Translation. And so if you've got an NIV or something, it's going to read a little different. But this is what it says in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 through 17. So be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days Don't act thoughtlessly, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. Okay, there are two keys to answer this question, what is the wise thing to do, in these verses. The first key in asking the question, is it the wise thing to do, is this phrase, be careful how you live, don't live like fools. You may be saying, well, why is that the first key? Well, because many of us who've been walking with Jesus for a long time in our life have a tendency, okay? And that tendency is to think that we really no longer struggle and battle with sin in our lives. We look around at everybody else and we can see the sin in their lives, but we don't really see it in ours, and we don't see some of the big sins going on, and so we kind of dismiss it, you know. Oh, we'll see someone smoking crack, and we're like, hey, I don't smoke crack, I'm good. You know, we'll see somebody kicking down a door and then going in with a gun and stealing stuff, and we're saying, hey, man, I don't do that. That stuff doesn't even tempt me. I must be good, man. I must be solid with Jesus. We can pay our bills. We have a house. Our kids pretty much stay out of trouble. We have a job. But these are the exact people that Paul was writing to when he wrote this letter. He's addressing those people in this chapter, chapter 5. It was written to followers of Jesus who seem to have it all together, who are living their life, at least to those who look on from the outside, the way that Jesus wants them to, and yet he warns them to not live like fools. So how do we keep from living like fools? Well, the fool is the person who says to himself or herself, I don't need to set up any sort of boundaries in my life because I've got this under control. I'm not going to end up in that position. It's a person who is confident in their own abilities and strength, and so therefore they don't need to worry about asking the question, what is wise, because they're wiser than that question and they're never going to make a dumb decision. You know, you say things like, I don't need to put up boundaries between me and somebody of the opposite sex because I'm never going to make that mistake. I'm never going to cheat on my wife. I'm never going to cheat on my husband. You know, so there's not a need to put up boundaries. And so I know I'm not going to get hooked into drugs. I know I'm not going to get hooked into alcohol. And so therefore, I don't have to worry about putting up boundaries with those things in my life because I don't get addicted. That stuff doesn't tempt me. Well, can I tell you that if you think that you're too strong to fall for that, you're one of the biggest fools of all. Proverbs, the book that we looked at last week, chapter 16 and verse 18, tells us that pride comes before a fall. Pride goes before destruction, and haughtiness before a fall. See, when we have pride in ourselves that says, I've got this, I don't need boundaries, we are perfectly setting ourselves up for a fall and are acting like a fool. See, back in November, we had Loving Hands Ministry here, and they were talking about their life experiences and how they'd gotten caught up in all of this sort of stuff, drugs, alcohol, crime, all sorts of crazy stuff, and they told their stories of how Jesus set us free. And I hope that when you were hearing that story, you were saying to yourself, man, because this is what I was saying to myself, man, if it wasn't for the grace of God, I'd be one of those guys standing up there because I could totally see myself going down the road that they went down. But too many times we paint our picture in such a wonderful light, we don't think we're going to end up there. Man, every time I see a pastor on TV who's fallen morally, I don't think to myself, moron. I would have had that. Why did you fall to that? No. That can't be our attitude in anything. We have to know in order to keep from falling for things, in order to keep from being a fool, we have to remember that we haven't arrived and we need to set up boundaries in our life regardless. So this verse tells us then not to be a fool and then to think and understand. I mean, isn't thinking and understanding what this question, what is the wise thing to do, does? Doesn't that make us think and understand? Yes, it does. But to think and understand on a deeper level, we have to push harder than just with that question. To think and understand, we have to ask ourselves three things in association with the question, is it wise? And the first one is this: is it wise based on my past? Because this is the deal. Our past and the things that have tempted us, the things that have pulled us away, the things that have pulled us down are sitting there in our past, but they have a lot of power and they can do a lot of things to pull us back. Let me paint this picture like this. Let's say before I was a follower of Jesus, I was an Ajax sniffer, all right? Y'all know what Ajax is? That cleaner that you sprinkle in the bathtub and in the sink and in the toilet, and you use it to scrub it down. Well, let's say I was just addicted to sniffing this stuff, man. I just loved the chlorine high. I would sit down, before I go to work in the morning, I'd get up and cut myself out a couple of lines of Ajax and snort it all up. And then, while I was at work, I'd go out to my car at lunch and make a big pile of Ajax and just go like this with my face. Scarface. Anybody seen that movie? It's probably not the movie to be promoting from the stage, but anyways, lunch or on bathroom breaks, I go into the bathroom at work and sniff stuff up. And then Friday night, I go home, lock myself in the house, and just put out lines of Ajax everywhere and snort that stuff up. And live my weekend in a chlorine-induced Ajax frenzy. Well, at some point, I give my life to Jesus. Okay, and Jesus comes in and he sets me free, and I'm no longer addicted to the Ajax. He's done a work in my life, and I was able to quit. And now the longer I walk with Jesus, the less the temptation gets. Yeah, sure, Dana and I may be shopping at Walmart sometime, and we walk down the cleaner aisle, and I see some containers of Ajax, and I think to myself, well, what if? Maybe just one. But I never give in. Carol seems to be enjoying that. Well, suddenly, the Ajax factory calls me, Carol, and wants me to go on a tour. They tell me, come see the plant, and we'll fill your car up with Ajax on your way home. So I stop, and I have to ask the question, what is wise based on my past? And because this thing had been such a force in my life, because it had such power over me, the wise thing to do would to be skip the tour of the Ajax plant, to skip having all of that stuff shoved in my car, and do something else with that day and with that time. You see, if something else has tempted us in the past, then the wise thing for us to do is stay away from it. Okay, regardless of how long we have been free from it, all it takes is one opportunity, one taste, one little shot, and we'll spiral down into a mess real quick. If something has tempted you in the past, ask yourself the question, what is the wise thing to do based on my past, and set up boundaries as far away from it as you can. Then the second question that we ask ourselves is this: what is wise based on my present circumstance and situation? Another illustration. Hopefully, Carol, you'll enjoy this one. All right, so let's say my temptation is shoes, Carol. All right, I love shoes. You know, shoes used to be only a woman thing where you'd find hundreds of pairs of shoes. Now I know dudes who got hundreds of pairs of shoes in their closet. Okay? And so let's say I'm a shoe guy. I've got an addiction to buying shoes. I've got the LeBrons. I've got the Jordans. I've got the Kobes. I don't know these names, so I got to read them from my sheet. Maybe you ladies know them. Aquazzura, Christian Louboutin, and Stuart Weitzman heels. I got those in there just in case I'm feeling the need. I'm feeling a little feminine. I need to strap on some heels some night before I go out. Okay? I've just got the place packed out with shoes. But here's the problem. All my money is going to purchasing shoes. I'm not paying my mortgage. I'm not paying my car payment. I'm not paying my light bill. I'm not paying any of this stuff. The bank is threatening to take the house. The bank is threatening to take the car. I only eat ramen noodles for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because I think nutrition should be optional because it's a waste of finances that I need for these shoes. But one morning I wake up and realize that my love of shoes is destroying my life, and so I decide I'm going to ask the question, what is the wise thing? I know I can't keep spending money the way that I'm spending the money because soon all I'll have left is my shoes. So for the last week, I fought and battled that temptation, have not gone to a mall or any place that sells shoes. One day my friend calls me up on a Saturday morning and says, hey, let's go to the shoe outlet. They've got Nike, they got Adidas, they got Converse, they got Timberland, and every other brand you can think of. And the deal is I'm still not in a place where I know I can walk into a shoe store and buy anything. See, I know that when I get there, I'm going to give in. I'm going to purchase something. And so what should I do? In this case, I ask the question, what is the wise thing to do based on my current circumstances? And because it is still there, it's still sitting there, and it's a very real temptation in my life, I say to myself, you know what? The wise thing to do is not to go to the shoe store with my friend and instead offer some other option so that I'm not put in a place where I am tempted to fall into sin. And that's what this question looks like in our life. We got to look at our life and see what's tempting us now and make decisions based on what the wise thing would be to do based on our current situation and circumstances. I know a guy who got rid of his smartphone and went back to a flip phone that only had calling and texting on it because having a smartphone, the temptation for pornography was so strong that he felt that he couldn't have it. And this is the deal. Some of us won't make that kind of commitment, though, because we're afraid of what we're going to miss out on if we get rid of our smartphone. But can I tell you what we're going to miss out on in getting rid of our smartphone or something like that is not as great as the freedom that we're going to experience when we're able to walk away from the sin and the things that tempt us and pull us away from God and give us that life of freedom. So ask the second question. What is the wise thing to do based on my current things that are currently tempting me? Then the third question, you've probably already guessed what this one's going to be. What is the wise thing to do based on my future hopes and dreams? Gotta ask ourselves, man, what do I want my future to look like? You know, what kind of picture do I want to paint? You know, if you're sitting in here and you're 12 years old and you're thinking of your future, you're thinking of decades from now. You got to think to yourself, what's the wise thing to do for me to get to that picture that I'm painting in my head? If the picture you're painting in your head is you want to go to college, then you want to get a job, then you want to get married, then you want to have kids, then you want to have this life, this American dream, whatever that may be, that you know what? Then what you're saying to yourself, what is wise based on my future? All of the decisions that you make have to be determined by that thought, by that vision, by that heart, by that passion that you have. I mean, if you're making decisions to not study, not do your homework, not get good grades, guess what? You're falling short. Your first one is college. If that's your first dream, you're not going to make it there if you're just getting all F's in school. You got to think of your future. The same thing is true even if we're 65 in this room. Okay? We still have to think of our future. What kind of picture do we want to paint? What do we want our family to remember us by? Do we want to be remembered as the person who wrecked the family, who brought pain, heartache, and all kinds of other crap into the household? Or do we want to be remembered as the person who lived a godly life and set a godly example and set a foundation for the rest of the family to follow up and live by? We've got to determine what we want our future to look like, and then we need to make decisions, what is wise, based upon that picture that we're painting for the future that we want to see. Lewis, if you could come back up. Now, there's one thing that I will say to everybody who's a Christian in this room. It's this. Our tendency with stuff like this is to do something like this. God speaks to us. God tells us something. You know, we're supposed to get rid of our smartphone. And what we do is we then jump to, well, if God's telling me to get rid of my smartphone, that must mean every Christian needs to get rid of their smartphone or they're living in sin. That's not how it works, okay? Too often, we take what God is speaking to us when it's not there in the scriptures. We take what God is speaking to us and we then apply it to a general rule to everybody else, and we judge their Christianity and their faith and their walk with God based upon the things that God has spoken to us and how we're to live our life and let it be worked out on a daily basis. God's going to give me different boundaries than he's going to give you. He's going to give you different boundaries than he gives to your neighbor. He's going to give husband and wife even probably different boundaries, because there's different things in our past. There's different things in our present that are affecting us and are affecting the way that we're going to live our life. And so as long as it's not written down in the Bible and God hasn't specifically said, you shall not, we can't take things that God has said to us and make everybody else apply them to their lives. So we've got to be careful with that. We've got to be careful with that. We don't all need to get rid of our smartphones. As I said, we need to concentrate on you. I need to concentrate on me and what God is speaking to me and what he wants to do in my life, and not worry about everyone else. He's got a word for each of us. He's got boundaries for each of us. He's got plans and purposes for each of us that are different. So in conclusion this morning, in asking the question, what is the wise thing to do? We need to go in a little deeper and ask, what is wise based upon my past? What is wise based upon my present situation and circumstances? And then, what is wise based on the future that I want painted, the picture that I want defined of my life? And when we do that, when we paint that picture, asking what is wise based on those three things, we are going to live a life that people are going to look at and they are going to say, man, they lived a good life. That's a life I want to emulate. That's a life I want to have mine be like. And so be wise. Be wise. And ask those questions to help make the right decision.